This alliance between our nations was forged in the crucible of war and strengthened by the trials of history. From the Incheon landings to Pork Chop Hill, American and South Korean soldiers have fought together, sacrificed together, and triumphed together. Almost 67 years ago, in the spring of 1951, they recaptured what remained of this city where we are gathered so proudly today. It was the second time in a year that our combined forces took on steep casualties to retake this capital from the communists. Over the next weeks and months, the men soldiered through steep mountains and bloody, bloody battles. Driven back at times, they will their way north to form the line that today divides the oppressed and the free. What you have built is truly an inspiration. Your economic transformation was linked to a political one. The proud, sovereign, and independent people of your nation demanded the right to govern themselves. You secured free parliamentary elections in 1988, the same year you hosted your first Olympics. Soon after, you elected your first civilian president in more than 3 decades. And when the republic you won faced financial crisis, you lined up by the millions to give your most prized possessions, your wedding rings, heirlooms, and gold luck keys to restore the promise of a better future for your children. Your wealth is measured in more than money. It is measured in achievements of the mind and achievements of spirit. Over the last several decades, your scientists have engineered so many magnificent things. You've pushed the boundaries of technology, pioneered miraculous medical treatments, and emerged as leaders in unlocking the mysteries of our universe. Korean authors penned roughly 40,000 books this year. Korean musicians fill concert halls all around the world. Young Korean students graduate from college at the highest rates of any country. And Korean golfers are some of the best on earth. The flourishing ends and the prison state of North Korea sadly begins. Workers in North Korea labor grueling hours in unbearable conditions for almost no pay. Recently, the entire working population was ordered to work for 70 days straight, or else pay for a day of rest. Families live in homes without plumbing, and fewer than half have electricity. Parents bribe teachers in hopes of saving their sons and daughters from forced labor. More than 1 million North Koreans died of famine in the 1990s, and more continue to die of hunger today. Among children under the age of 5, nearly 30% of afflicted and are afflicted by stunted growth due to malnutrition. And yet, in 2012 and 2013, the regime spent an estimated $200 million, or almost half the money that it allocated to improve living standards for its people, to instead build even more monuments, towers, and statues to glorify its dictators. What remains of the meager harvest of the North Korean economy is distributed according to perceived loyalty to a twisted regime. Far from valuing its people as equal citizens, this cruel dictatorship measures them, scores them, and ranks them based on the most arbitrary indications of their allegiance to the state. This reality, this wonderful place, your success, is the greatest cause of anxiety, alarm, and even panic to the North Korean regime. That is why the Kim regime seeks conflict abroad to distract from total failure that they suffer at home. Since the so-called armistice, there have been hundreds of North Korean attacks on Americans and South Koreans. These attacks have included the capture and torture of the brave American soldiers of the USS Pueblo, repeated assaults on American helicopters, and the 1969 drowning of a U.S. surveillance plane that killed 31 American servicemen. The regime has made numerous lethal incursions in South Korea, attempted to assassinate senior leaders, attacked South Korean ships, and tortured Otto Warmbier, ultimately leading to that fine young man's death. All the while, the regime has pursued nuclear weapons with the deluded hope that it could blackmail its way to the ultimate objective. And that objective we are not going to let it have. We are not going to let it have. A sky-top view of this peninsula shows a nation of dazzling light in the south and a mass of impenetrable darkness in the north. We seek a future of light, prosperity, and peace, but we are only prepared to discuss this brighter path for North Korea if its leaders cease their threats and dismantle their nuclear program. The sinister regime of North Korea is right about only one thing. The Korean people do have a glorious destiny, but they could not be more wrong about what that destiny looks like. The destiny of the Korean people is not to suffer in the bondage of oppression, but to thrive in the glory of freedom. What South Koreans have achieved on this peninsula is more than a victory for your nation. It is a victory for every nation that believes in the human spirit. And it is our hope that someday soon, all of your brothers and sisters in the North will be able to enjoy the fullest of life intended by God. Your republic shows us all of what is possible. In just a few decades, with only the hard work, courage, and talents of your people, you turned this war-torn land into a nation blessed with wealth, rich in culture, and deep in spirit. You built a home where all families can flourish and where all children can shine and be happy. This Korea stands strong and tall among the great community of independent, confident, and peace-loving nations. We are nations that respect our citizens, cherish our liberty, treasure our sovereignty, and control our own destiny. We affirm the dignity of every person and embrace the full potential of every soul. and we are always prepared to defend the vital interests of our people against the cruel ambition of tyrants. Together we dream of a Korea that is free, a peninsula that is safe, and families that are reunited once again. We dream of highways connecting north and south, of cousins embracing cousins, and this nuclear nightmare replaced with the beautiful promise of peace. Until that day comes, we stand strong and alert. Our eyes are fixed to the north and our hearts praying for the day when all Koreans can live in freedom. Thank you. God bless you. God bless the Korean people. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Talk more about the U.S. president's trip to Asia with John Delury. He is an associate professor at the Yonsei University Graduate School of International Studies, and he's joining us now live from Seoul. Great to see you as always. I guess first off, what are South Koreans and the region looking to hear from President Trump during his address to the South Korean National Assembly in the coming hours? Are they looking for reassurance that Trump is committed to preventing war with North Korea?
Yeah, well, I think the president himself described it as a comprehensive speech, and that is something that people are looking for. You know, there have been a lot of mixed messages across the year in terms of the Trump administration approach to North Korea. So I think there is a yearning for some kind of coherence and a stress on, you know, what's the exact mixture here of policy measures. We know the goal is denuclearization, but how are you going to get there? Clearly, it's not something that's going to happen soon. So what's your path? Amara, you said reassurance, and that's also very important. But the question of reassurance is much more complicated now. South Koreans are looking for President Trump to reassure them that he's not going to start a war. You know, it used to be South Korea wanted reassurance that America would back up the South. Now there's concern are the Americans going to start something that is catastrophic for South Korea, for the region, probably for the global economy. So the dynamics have shifted since, say, a year ago.
I'd imagine, though, that many South Koreans are relieved, you know, hearing from Trump not using the fire and fury comments and the incendiary language that he's been using, especially not on this trip. In fact, he's actually talking about coming to the table for Pyongyang and let's make a deal regarding North Korea. How do you read these signals from Trump?
Yeah, well, that's correct. His language has been quite measured in Tokyo and in Seoul, and a couple times now. He's really kind of gone out of his way to say, well, talks can be part of this. He said he could meet with Kim Jong-un. It's far too early, and that's a responsible thing to say. One thing I've noticed, however, is that those comments seem to come in the Q&A section, not in the prepared speech. So again, I think there's a question, you know, and the North Koreans study all this stuff very carefully. And the South Koreans and the Chinese, all of whom really support getting the parties back to the table, de-escalating, and then working on a slower path of gradual progress. I think that's why there will be a lot of attention to the comprehensive speech, the prepared text at the National Assembly today. Does the president affirm dialogue, negotiation, a deal are a central part of his strategy to resolve this problem?
You know, and I have to ask you about President Trump and President Moon's relationship and how they view each other, considering that Trump hasn't been exactly shy about criticizing Moon about appeasing, quote-unquote, North Korea. And Moon has publicly countered Trump's fire and fury comments by declaring, look, there's not going to be war on the peninsula. Do they trust each other?
Well, it's hard to know, right? I mean, unless you're in the room, what the dynamics are like. It doesn't look like a bromance from the outside, that's for sure. But there does seem to be a certain level of mutual respect. You know, Moon Jae-in is not a pushover. He's a strong guy. He's been through a lot. He's very popular here. You know, his popularity by polls is maybe twice the size of Donald Trump's, domestically speaking. So even though South Korea is a smaller power, much smaller than the other, smaller economically, you know, Moon has his own strengths. Donald Trump seems to be someone who respects strengths. And so, you know, again, looking at the trip so far, it's not bonhomie, but I do detect so far publicly mutual respect between the two of them.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. John Delury, appreciate your expertise. Thank you very much for your time.
You bet.